Hello everyone and welcome to an awesome game of chess from yesterday's Champions Showdown from round 2. It is Garry Kasparov versus Hikaru Nakamura, and as you know, Kasparov comes out pretty much once a year to play chess in St. Louis, and he doesn't... last year I believe in Zagreb he did play in the regular event where he had to brush up on chess theory, but here, as it's chess 960 or chess 9LX or official random, however you want to call it, I don't want to call it chess 9LX, but if you guys insist, you can do that, in the comfort of your own home. Here he can just come prepare a little bit and then just play regular chess. Of course, he is still quite the beast, and he will, of course, try to do very well this year. Last year, like I said, he had like 5 out of 10. I don't know if it was like on 50%, but it was a fairly good result. And he said that as long as he doesn't just get obliterated in an event, he should be coming back every year. But he is already 59 years old. Hikaru is 34, so it's quite the difference. So let's see how Garry deals with the speed demon in this wild position. So you can see, for those of you who are maybe new to this, the pieces are not regularly placed. This is chess 960, as there are 960 different formations that the board can take, and this is obviously one of them. They are selected at random, and the position that is selected, that is being played on all the boards. So Kasparov has the white pieces, and he opens with g4, which is very interesting, as if you put the starting position to an engine, the engine will give you d4 as best, c3 as best, b3 as best, g3 as best, but not g4. G4 is something Garry came up with, as I believe the players are allowed to study the position that will be played for like an hour before the tournament starts, so they can prepare at least a little bit, because they've never actually seen this position. So already as of move 1, we have a completely new game. And if you're interested in the time format, this is rapid chess, 20 minutes per player, and you get a 5-second increment starting from move 1. The prize fund is $150,000 plus, not plus, and the first place is $37,000 and $50,000. So just some extra info for you guys to wield with. Kasparov opens with g4, and it of course makes very good sense. There's already a rook behind the pawn. The queen is now open on this wonderful diagonal. So Hikaru plays c6, already countering the white queen. On h1 we have c4 by Kasparov, and now pawn to g5. Hikaru also does the same, opens up the rook and the queen, and now h4. Garry wants to play h captures on g5 and open up the white queen. So Hikaru plays g captures on h4, queen captures, and now pawn to d5, striking in the center, c captures, and now knight to c3. Kasparov goes after the d5 pawn, and now you could advance it to d4, but as Kasparov chose this wild g4 line, obviously he has something maybe even prepared for this. Hikaru plays the sort of timid e6 move. We have e3 by Kasparov. We have knight to g6, just nicely continuing development with tempo. The queen is attacked, queen to h5, and now knight to c6 by Hikaru. And here Kasparov plays g5. It's a beautiful move, takes control of f6 and h6, and this knight is now coming to h2 to g4 and then to f6. If this knight lands on f6, then it should be very good for Kasparov. So bishop to d7, Hikaru has to move the bishops in order to castle. We have pawn to d4, and now pawn to a6. Knight to h2, Kasparov starts the knight's journey. Bishop to d6, and now knight to g4, preparing knight to f6 check, and now of course bishop to e7. Hikaru now controls the f6 square, and now we have bishop to d2. If you go something like knight h6 attack the rook, just rook f8, and it's not really all that much. Kasparov really wants the knight on f6 to put pressure on the h7 pawn as well as the center of the board. So bishop to d2, we have castles, queenside castles by Hikaru, and now rook to h1. You can see that the bishop here, the queen, and the rook are all nicely attacking that h7 pawn. Also, once the knight lands on f6, it's not going to be easy holding this. So rook to g7, Hikaru adds another defender, a3 by Kasparov, and now king to b8. We have bishop to c2, now preparing to bring the rook into the game, and now knight to f6. e5, attacking in the center, and only now Kasparov jumps with knight to f6. We have bishop to e6. You could also trade right away. For example, bishop captures, g captures, and rook g to g8. But then it's well, it's a question of how do you play this, because the h7 pawn is hanging, the d5 pawn is hanging, but it's not all that clear. Once e captures on d4, the white king is in the center, and you know Hikaru is pretty good at positions like these. So although it is possible, Hikaru instead goes bishop to e6. We have knight to e2 by Kasparov, now adding more defense to the d4 pawn. Bishop to c3 is coming. Rook to c8, and now bishop to c3, and now pawn to e4. Hikaru closes the center, now also sort of limits the mobility of the light square bishop, but he of course allows pawn to f3. Kasparov has many options here. He could also just play bishop captures on e4, for example. Captures and d5 is also possible, but f3 is maybe more precise. So e captures on f3, queen captures on f3, and now queen back to d8. Now saying, okay, if you put pressure on the h7 pawn, or if you capture it, at some point I will capture on g5. So knight to g3, Kasparov just continues improving his position. Bishop captures on f6, queen captures on f6, offering a queen trade, and this would be good for him. For example, if Hikaru trades, queen captures, g captures, rook g to g8, the h7 pawn again is hanging, the bishops are very, very strong, the pawn on f6 is very strong, it's very hard to reach it once this knight lands. For example, on e5, it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful position. So he should be very, very close to winning here. So instead, queen to c7 by Hikaru, and now Hikaru says, okay, you capture my rook, I'm going to capture your knight here, but it's not possible. If queen captures on g3 check, king e2, just queen g2 check. And now if you don't want to go back and lose the rook, you have to play something like king to d3, so the rook defends the rook, but then bishop f5 check, and you are in a mating net. Just e4, knight to f4 with check, king to e3, and now queen e2 check. You give up a knight, captures, queen f2 will be checkmate, as all of the squares now are covered. So after this queen to c7 move, Kasparov boldly goes forward, king to f2, defends his knight, so the rook is still hanging, rook g to g8, and now rook captures on h7 finally. And now Kasparov is just up a pawn, and Hikaru will have to fight for equality. So knight to f8, we have rook to h6 now, and king to a8. Still, the dark square bishop is in the game, so it makes sense to move the king away from this diagonal and, well, generally as far away from the action as possible. Rook to g1, Kasparov brings the rook into the game, and now knight to a5, preparing to bring the knight to c4. We have knight to e2, and now knight to c4. We have bishop to d3. You don't want the bishop here as it's undefended, so just bishop to d3, and now queen to d7. We have rook g to h1, and now preparing rook to h8. As Kasparov is up a pawn, he wants to trade off both pairs of rooks and then just enjoy his advantage. So knight to g6, and now knight to f4. If he can trade off the knight as well, that's gonna take him even closer to his goal. So Hikaru trades, he doesn't find anything else, captures, knight to d6, and now just rook to h8. Now Kasparov will trade off both pairs of rooks. Knight e4 check, you have to trade here, as there's a royal fork currently happening. So bishop captures, e captures, d captures on e4, and now rook captures on g8. We have rook captures on g8 and just a rook to h8. So cleaning everything off the board, we have rook captures on h8, queen captures on h8, and now what do you play? King to a7 must be played. If you try to trade off the queens because it's bishops of opposite colors, well, you can just trade, and then king e3, you attack the pawn. For example, bishop here, just d5, and then you march your king into the game, and of course, very easily win the game. So it's not possible as the black king is too far away. So instead, king to a7 by Hikaru, queen to e5 now, very strong and very, very good move by Gary, just centralizing the queen. The queen will be most powerful on such a great square. Bishop to d5 by Hikaru, and now pawn to f5. Now the pawns are incredibly strong. At some point g6 will be played, and then Kasparov will either have a passed g pawn or a passed f pawn. So here pawn to b6, we have a4, and pawn to a5, we have king to e3, getting the king into the action as well, bishop to b7, and now pawn to b3. Putting the pawn on a light square, if your opponent has a light square bishop, usually isn't the greatest of ideas, but here Kasparov has a very, very concise idea, because if, let's say, queen d5, you can just trade, and yes, your pawn is hanging, but Kasparov will just push it to b4, and if captures, captures. If you attack this pawn again, he will just push it to a5, so it's not a problem. So here, queen to d8 by Hikaru, going after the g5 pawn, and now just pawn to f6, and now Kasparov, once he pushes g6, he's threatening g7, and also if captures just f7, you already have a passed pawn on f7. So queen to c8, and now pawn to d5. Here the bishop is hanging, so you have to be careful not to blunder a piece. It would be terrible to lose this game by blundering a piece. And now pawn to d5. The queen defends the bishop, and also the pawn starts marching forward. We have queen to g4 by Hikaru, and the bishop to d4 now. We have queen to f3 with check, king to d2, now comes queen to d3 with check, and king to e1. And now how do you continue checking the white king? We have queen to b1 check, king to f2, and now how do you play this? You should continue with something like queen to c2 check, or queen to a2 check, or queen captures on b3. Hikaru goes for queen captures on b3. He can always just continue checking the king, and Kasparov just pushes the pawn. There's nothing for him to do but this. So d6, queen to c2 with check. We have king to g3, and now Hikaru should play something like queen d3 or queen b3 check, but he plays d3, and it makes sense. He opens up this diagonal. He wants to play queen to g2 check, so if Kasparov wastes a move capturing this, it should be very good for him. But he messed up this position. He blundered the game away, but only if Kasparov figures out why he actually put the bishop on d4. Because I'm sure at the moment he played bishop to d4, he had this in mind, but well, it's just a very, very, very fast game. I think Kasparov was in time trouble for quite quite a bit of this game, but later on Hikaru also got into time trouble. But you know, that's besides the point. Feel free to pause the video and win this game for Kasparov while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this absolute brilliancy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is queen captures on a5. I'm just joking. It's not. It's a good move, but it's not the one that wins the game, even though some of you have thought of this. The problem is after king to b8 and queen captures on b6, there's just no good continuation. Of course, queen f2 check is coming, and then after king g4, queen f3 check, and you are never getting out of check. King h4, queen h1 check, king g4, queen f3 check, and so on. You can only lose this game. So the move that, of course, you guys found after this pawn to e3 move is none other than bishop captures on b6. And it seems like such a weird move. Why would you do this? But the point is exactly in this g6 pawn. So here Kasparov really had an option, or rather a chance of creating a brilliancy, but he missed it. The point is after bishop captures, you don't really have a good move. If the king goes here, we're going to play queen captures on a5. If you go here, just pawn to d7 opens up a discovery. So your only move is to capture the bishop, and once the bishop is captured, queen b5 check, all of the squares are covered, only square is king a7. Now queen captures on a5 with check, and now again black has only two options, bishop to a6, or you move the king. But regardless of what black plays, your next move will be the same. So let's say you play king to b8, queen to c7 check. We would play this even if bishop to a6 was played, because then it would be check to the king on a7. So now black must trade, otherwise he loses the queen here. So queen captures, now pawn captures with check, king captures, and now look at this, pawn to g6. That's the point. And now, of course, the threat is g7, g8, queen, or if f captures, then pawn to f7, and of course the bishop is not in time, as it's a light square bishop. Kasparov would be queening on f8 on a dark square, and the king is too far away. So whatever you play here, doesn't really matter. Next move, Kasparov gets a queen and Hikaru resigns. So it was in the position, but Kasparov missed it. He played bishop captures, or rather he played queen captures on e3, and now he gives Hikaru a chance to start checking. So queen to g2 with check, king f4, queen to h2 with check, queen to g3, queen to d2 with check, and now Kasparov doesn't want to repeat with queen to d2. He starts running up with the king, so king to e5, and now we have queen to a2. Now going for not queen e6, but controlling this diagonal, not allowing the king to move, and just asking, what do you play here? So Kasparov goes back. If you push the pawn, for example, pawn to d7, then okay, queen to e6 check, king to f4, and queen to e4 will be checkmate. But Kasparov, of course, goes back. King to f4. We have queen to d5 now, going for queen to e4 check, which would win the bishop, and Kasparov just plays king to e3. Incredible blunder in time trouble. Queen to e3 and the game goes on. It's a draw, or even bishop captures on b6 is still possible, but after king to e3, now Kasparov throws the game away. Queen to e4 with check, and Kasparov blunders the bishop. King f2, queen captures on d4 check, king f1, and now bishop to e4. And it was in this position on move 58 that Kasparov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You can't push d7, queen controls that. You can't push g6, the bishop and pawn control that. So there is nothing for you to do. You are down a full piece, and there is no compensation whatsoever. So it was quite the game. Kasparov played brilliantly. He started very aggressive with g4. He captured all the critical squares. He really pushed very, very nicely, and then at one point where Hikaru gave him a chance with this e3 pawn push, he missed the bishop captures on b6. But it was such a beautiful idea. This could have been Kasparov's Fischer random immortal if this had been played. Just captures, you trade off everything because it's forced. There is absolutely nothing black can do to avoid this. We can even show it one more time because it's so beautiful. So after e3, just bishop captures, king captures, queen b5 check, king a7, queen captures on a5 check, only moves, but it doesn't matter what the black king does, just trade the queens off, captures, this comes with check, so you have to capture back, so king captures and g6. Spectacular. F captures f7, you get a queen. Absolutely beautiful. So shame for Kasparov that it didn't go through, but it was a great game nonetheless by both of them. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. The first game will be showing from the Champions Showdown. If you have a favorite of your own, do use #suggestion, and I will definitely look into it. I would like to thank Abdul Rahman Al Saud, Simon Osborne, Paul Sertanovic, Jose Palacio, and Filippo Palacio, Yusuf Papa, and Panama for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Champions Showdown until it finishes. And also, I forgot I really wanted to show you something, but I forgot to prepare it. So if any of you are still watching, I don't know, maybe you just left as you know, you thought the video was going to finish. But here is an incredible photo by Leonard Otis from this event of Kasparov and Hikaru. Let me just make that a bit smaller. It's absolutely beautiful photo. There you have it. Absolutely incredible. You can see that most of the players are behind them, but they're really focused on something. So if you guys could try to figure out what they are so focused at, I mean, it's like a 2900 player just walked through the door and they're like, oh, I don't believe it. So, you know, if you have a nice idea of what they might be looking at, do share in the comment section below. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.